Okay, I want to do a comparison of these two cartridge accessories for the Sega Saturn. They both do similar things, but this one actually does quite a bit more. Now this first one here is a bit more uncommon, and it actually came with the Sega Saturn when I picked it up quite a few years ago. And this allows you to play import games on the Sega Saturn, which it's kind of a must if you ever get a Sega Saturn, as there's not too many US games and they tend to be extremely expensive. So this was a very useful thing. However, it really only is usable to play import games. The Action Replay, however, has a number of nifty features. First and foremost, it allows you to play import games, of course. It allows you to use cheats, and it allows you to back up your saves, as well as act as a RAM expansion. Now, some games for the Sega Saturn, I believe mainly, if not only released in Japan, required more RAM than the system came with. So let's go ahead and compare the two real quick. So here we have the two different units. Now normally Action Replays come in a white color, kind of like this here, but I got one with a black cartridge as it matches the Saturn better, and I usually don't take this out. I keep this in at all times. But yeah, so they're quite similar. There we go. That's what the Sega Saturn cartridge looks like. Now I'm not actually sure if the cartridge slot was used that much in the US. Maybe for the Sega Saturn Link system, or it's like whatever they called their internet thing. But I do not have one of those. Now I also have a little manual. It's not really a manual, it's more just like a fact sheet that comes with the Action Replay Plus, and it basically tells you how to use it, how you can use cheats and all that stuff in the memory manager. There it is in Japanese. So yeah, this one is definitely more useful than this one, and this one also has another issue that this one I haven't run into yet. So let's go ahead and do just a comparison real quick of how operation works. Okay, first up I'm going to test Dead or Alive. Now one issue with the Sega Satellite is, as you can see, it just happened here. The main issue I have with the Sega Satellite is that it doesn't like to load every single time you turn it on. So let's go ahead and try it again. Didn't work. Okay. Let's see how many times it takes before it finally does load the Sega Satellite. Nope, didn't do it. Now this is what you're supposed to see. So that was the third or fourth time. And all this does is let you play Japanese format games. Okay. Now keep in mind, in order to navigate both this and the Action Replay, you need to have a controller plugged into the, I believe, I haven't tested it with the second controller port, but you do have to have it with one of them. I believe it's the first player one's controller port. So this ends up being an issue with games like House of the Dead and other light gun games. However, in the case of those, a lot of those aren't too much more expensive in the US than Japan. House of the Dead is, but House of the Dead is also a terrible port. Okay, now that we see this is running, I'm going to just swap out the Sega Satellite cartridge while keep the same game in. We are powering on. You see this worked the first time. I have not had this fail to load, so it's also why I always keep it in, because I mean it's extremely useful. So let's go ahead and go through its own menu here. As you can see, the Sega Satellite just uses the Sega Saturn menu. This uses its own. Memory Manager is extremely useful. As you can see here, I have these are all on the Action Replay, And here's what I have on the system. The system uses a basically a volatile RAM memory, I believe is how you what the terminology is. So it's battery backed up. So if you remove the battery, you lose all this. Now this, I believe, is just like how a memory card works. I haven't really opened up the Action Replay to take a look to see if it also uses like a volatile memory. But as you can see here, it can hold a lot more space. However, in order to access one of these saves, you do need to have it on the system memory. So this just more or less keeps it backed up. So, which is good for a lot of games, is you cannot really, as you can see, Daytona 96 uses up 71 blocks. Deep Fear uses up 90 blocks. So it eats up real quick. And I believe there's a couple games. I think I tried playing an NBA Live game that won't even load if there's not enough free space. So you have to keep that in mind. Okay, now we can go to cheats. I'm not sure if this game has any cheats. So this is just like a normal Action Replay that you'd find on other systems, or like a Game Shark. Now I believe the Game Shark app with N64 also lets you back up saves. I think maybe even directly from the games themselves. So it doesn't look like Dead or Alive is here. But I believe you can edit these according to the manual anyway. Romance of the Three Kingdoms was released in the USA, but that's pretty rare. Okay, so there's not a whole lot of games here. I mean, there is a fair amount, I suppose. Different versions. Okay, so start game. See, no, he has no cheat selected, and looks like I had tested this with the World Series Baseball, and I put cheats to be on. So, but that game I have for the USA, so that doesn't really benefit in all these tests here. So let's go start game with no cheats enabled. Yep, and it just starts right back up. So all in all, while the Sega Satellite is more uncommon, and you think, well, if you only need it for import games, if you can find it for cheaper than Action Replay, why not get that? The Action Replay is much more useful, and also the Action Replay, I haven't had any issues with it not working like I have with the Sega Satellite. Now the one thing that I haven't been able to test is the RAM expansion, as I don't think I have any games that require that. Again, I think most of those are Japanese games. Well, I have a lot of Japanese games. What's cool about and fun about Sega Saturn is collecting games anyway, is that there's tons of neat Japanese games. Now, of course, games like this, Dead or Alive, there's no barrier to entry, as, I mean, it's just a tournament fighter. Of course, some other ones are very text heavy, so you have to keep that in mind. So as far as cost goes, I think I got Action Replay fluctuates from $30 to $40, which definitely isn't bad considering how much USA Sega Saturn games go. So if you're looking at like House of the Dead, for instance, that's not a cheap Japanese game, but it's really expensive here. And it's not like I said, it's not a good port, but it's just sort of like a barometer of how you can compare the prices of a lot of US games compared to Japanese games. So it's definitely a useful tool to have, and I would recommend the Action Replay far and above over the Sega Satellite.